Every single sailing, without exception, passengers try to sneak something past cruise ship security. Some of it is genuinely funny. Some of it is genuinely concerning. And some of it is so creative that even after years of doing this job, it still managed to surprise me. I worked as a cruise ship security officer for 8 years. I stood at that scanning checkpoint on embarkation day, sailing after sailing, watching passengers attempt to bring on board the things they were specifically told not to bring. Today I am telling you exactly what people try to smuggle, how creative they get, and what actually happens when security catches them. Stay until the end, because the most common thing people try to sneak on board is something almost every single passenger has attempted at least once. And I guarantee you have thought about doing it too. Welcome back to Cruise Ship Master, where former cruise workers expose the secrets cruise lines hope you never discover. Subscribe right now for weekly insider knowledge from people who actually worked these jobs. Today, a former cruise ship security officer with 8 years of experience reveals exactly what passengers try to smuggle on board every single sailing. Let us get into it. Smuggle Attempt 1, Alcohol, by far the most common. This is the single most common item passengers attempt to bring on board, and the creativity people apply to this specific category is genuinely remarkable. Most cruise lines restrict passengers from bringing their own alcohol on board, or limit it to a small number of bottles of wine or champagne per cabin. This policy exists because beverage sales are a significant revenue source for cruise lines, and passengers know it, which is exactly why so many people try to work around it. The most common method is the water bottle swap. Passengers empty a sealed water bottle, refill it with vodka or another clear spirit, and reseal it as convincingly as possible. The X-ray scanner does not detect the difference between water and vodka by appearance alone, but it absolutely detects density differences, and an experienced screener knows exactly what an oddly resealed bottle looks like. The second most common method is hiding alcohol inside other liquid containers, mouthwash bottles, sunscreen bottles, contact lens solution. The screening process at major cruise terminals has become specifically trained to recognize this pattern because it is so common. I have personally confiscated alcohol disguised in baby formula containers, inside hollowed-out books, and on one memorable occasion, inside a properly sealed and labeled juice box that had clearly been professionally resealed by someone who had clearly done this before. What happens when caught? The alcohol is confiscated and typically held at guest services for return at the end of the sailing. It is not usually destroyed, but you do not get it back until December. Smuggle Attempt 2, Outside food, especially from home. This one surprises people because it seems harmless, but cruise lines have genuine reasons for restricting outside food, and security takes it seriously. Passengers regularly attempt to bring homemade food, specific snacks from their home country, or items they are worried will not be available on board. I have seen everything from homemade tamales wrapped in foil to entire suitcases dedicated almost exclusively to specific brand snacks that a passenger did not want to live without for a week. The concern from the cruise line's perspective is biosecurity and food safety, particularly on international itineraries where bringing food from one country into the ports of another can violate customs regulations that have nothing to do with the cruise line itself. Most fresh produce, meat, and dairy products are confiscated immediately if discovered. Sealed, commercially packaged snack food is generally allowed through, though policies vary by cruise line and by itinerary. The most memorable example from my time was a passenger who attempted to bring an entire smoked ham, unwrapped, in a backpack, apparently believing that the smell would not give it away. It did. Smuggle Attempt 3, Pets. This one happens less often than alcohol or food, but when it happens, it is memorable, and the methods people use are remarkable. Most cruise lines do not allow pets on board, with very limited exceptions for certain specific cruise lines and certain documented service animals. Despite this clear policy, passengers regularly attempt to bring small pets on board hidden in luggage, in oversized handbags, or occasionally just held against their body under a jacket. The X-ray scanner sees through clothing and luggage in ways passengers consistently underestimate. A small dog hidden in a tote bag is immediately visible on the scanner screen as exactly what it is. I personally intercepted attempts involving small dogs, a cat on one occasion, and most memorably, a passenger who attempted to bring a small bird in a covered cage, apparently hoping that covering the cage would somehow prevent it from showing up on the scanner. What happens when caught? The pet cannot board. In every case I witnessed, this meant a family member had to either return the animal to a vehicle, arrange alternative care, or in the most difficult situations, the passenger had to choose between leaving the pet behind with someone or missing the cruise entirely. Smuggle attempt 4, irons and certain electrical appliances. This is a genuine fire safety issue, not a revenue protection policy, and most passengers do not realize how seriously cruise lines take it. Clothing irons, along with certain other high-heat electrical appliances, are prohibited on virtually every cruise ship because of fire risk in an enclosed cabin environment. This is one of the most consistently and strictly enforced prohibited item categories, and yet passengers attempt to bring irons on board constantly, usually because they simply did not read the prohibited items list before packing. This is rarely a deliberate smuggling attempt in the way alcohol smuggling is. Most passengers bringing an iron genuinely did not know it was prohibited. But the response from security is the same regardless of intent. Confiscated irons are held at guest services and returned at the end of the sailing, similar to alcohol. The cruise line's concern is specifically about the fire risk of leaving a hot iron unattended in a small cabin space, which has caused genuine onboard fires in the broader cruise industry historic. Smuggle attempt 5, drones. This is a relatively newer item on the prohibited list, becoming common only in the last several years as drone ownership has become widespread, and it catches a surprising number of passengers off guard. Drones are prohibited on virtually every major cruise line, both for safety reasons around the ship's structure and operations, and because of the privacy and security concerns of having a flying camera over a ship full of passengers and crew without specific permission. Passengers attempting to bring drones on board are usually doing so because they genuinely want aerial footage of their cruise for social media or personal memories, not because they are trying to violate any rule maliciously. But the policy is strictly enforced. I confiscated more drones in my final 2 years of cruise ship security than in my entire previous 6 years combined, reflecting how quickly drone ownership grew during that period. Confiscated drones follow the same process as alcohol and irons, held and returned at disembarkation. The most common thing, just slightly too much alcohol. This is what I promised you at the beginning, and it is genuinely the most common situation I encountered, far more often than any dramatic smuggling attempt. The vast majority of passengers are not trying to deceive anyone elaborately. They are simply bringing slightly more wine or champagne than their cruise line's stated limit allows, usually because they either did not check the specific policy or assumed the limit was more generous than it actually is. Most cruise lines allow 1 or 2 bottles of wine per cabin, and the most common scenario I witnessed, sailing after sailing, was a couple bringing 4 or 5 bottles, genuinely surprised to learn there was a limit at all. The resolution for this is almost always simple and friendly. Security explains the policy, the excess bottles are held at guest services, and the passenger gets them back at the end of the cruise, sometimes with the option to drink the allowed amount immediately and have the rest held. I want to be honest with you, this happens on essentially every single sailing, multiple times, and it is rarely treated as a serious violation. It is simply the most universal example of passengers not fully reading the specific policy of their specific cruise line before packing. So there you have it. What passengers actually try to bring on board a cruise ship, from someone who stood at that checkpoint for 8 years watching it happen. Alcohol disguised in every container imaginable. Homemade food from home. Pets hidden in bags. Irons that violate fire safety. Drones that violate privacy and safety policy. And most commonly of all, just slightly too much wine that nobody bothered to check the limit on. Before your next cruise, check your specific cruise line's prohibited items list. It takes 5 minutes and saves you the inconvenience of having anything held at the checkpoint. Subscribe to Cruise Ship Master for more insider knowledge every single week. See you in the next one.